because the Quran actually tells Christians to judge it by the gospel. And when Wes Huff does that, something goes very, very wrong for the Quran. Let's see it.
The Quran.
He's going here. Oh man, I love this. Wes Huff, a Christian apologist and public speaker, very popular online personality, discusses and takes down Islam live on stage.
When we look at what the Quran, which comes 600 years after Jesus, communicates, what we see is that it's claiming to communicate facts about very similar people and situations that the Bible is, and yet makes a lot of errors and mistakes that scream lack of verisimilitude and credibility. And ultimately, in chapter 4, verse 157, denies one of the most easily verifiable events of ancient history, which is the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It says that they neither, talking about the Jews, they neither crucified him, nor did he die, but it was made to appear to them. And it has the Jews boasting, "We killed Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of Mary," which is a very strange thing to say. If the Jews believed that and thought he was the Messiah, they wouldn't have killed him. So it starts off with an error, and then it goes on to completely deny that this event ever happened. And that is a problem for the Quran, and one that has many Muslims painted into a corner and trying to defend it. Because even the most skeptical of scholars, individuals who say, we can't really have much reliability in the source information about who Jesus was, but we can know that he was crucified and died under the Roman governorship of Pontius Pilate. We can know that because of both what the Bible teaches and from sources outside of the Bible. And so the Quran denies that simple fact, and in doing so, denies the reality of an event that we have an incredible level of confidence to say this event actually happened.
This is an excellent point that Wes makes here on stage because of several factors. Number one, just as he stated, there are sources outside of the Bible that verify this event occurring. You'll find even atheists agreeing, maybe they may not agree with Jesus Christ's divinity as the Son of God, but they would agree that the sources confirm that that he was crucified on the cross. This is something that's verified on countless times, especially with the document of Pontius Pilate. I don't recall exactly what it was specifically word for word, but this also verified the crucifixion of Jesus Christ.
That's the first problem. Wes isn't just saying believe the Bible, he's pointing to history. There's Roman and Jewish sources that treat Jesus' crucifixion as a real event. So the Quran isn't just disagreeing with Christians here, it's denying a fact that even many people who reject Christianity still accept. But that's only the first layer here because the Quran actually tells Christians to judge it by the gospel. And when Wes Huff does that, something goes very, very wrong for the Quran. Let's see it.
The Quran.
He's going here. Oh man, I love this. So this is called the Islamic dilemma. So the Quran tells Christians to judge by the gospel. So this is one of the biggest dilemmas that Islam has because the Quran, and he's going to get into all the details, but I'll just say briefly, the Quran states that we have to trust the Gospels, and they claim that the Gospels and the Torah support the Quran. But then many Muslims will claim that, the Gospels are corrupted when the Gospel clearly states that Jesus Christ was crucified, died, and rose on the third day. So it's very, just a little bit diluted.
The Quran is very different in that the Bible is 66 books written over a period of 1,600 years on 3 different continents by close to 40 different authors. The Quran is one book written in one time, 7th century, in one place, Arabia, in one language, Hajizi script Arabic. And so in one sense, it's not really fair to compare the Quran and the Bible because we're comparing apples to orchard. There's just so much more going on with the Bible. And then on top of that, the Quran, time and time again, talks about the previous scriptures that the Jews had, the Torah and the Gospel. And it says that these were documents that were given in the same nature as the revelation of the Quran. They were given with guidance and light. They were sent down in the same way. That Moses was given the Torah and it was full of guidance and light, and Jesus was given the Gospel and it was full of guidance and light. And then in chapter 6 of the Quran, it says, "And let the people of the Gospel judge by what they have therein, And if they do not judge by what Allah has revealed to them, then they are the defiantly disobedient. So it prefaces it by saying, God sent the Torah to Moses, he sent the gospel to Jesus, and the people of the gospel, Christians, need to judge by what Allah has given, what God has given to us as Christians, that being the gospel. And if we don't judge by using the gospel, then we are the defiantly disobedient. Here's the problem. When I do that, when I obey that, when I judge using the gospel, and I use that as the lens by which I look into the Quran, I find the Quran has no understanding of the communication of what the gospel facts are, historically or theologically. It denies its central precept.
This is a critical point in that if you talk to any well-meaning Christian, what is the basis of our faith? The number one thing that a person will say, whether they're 6 years old, 8 years old, or 60 years old, is that Christ saved us because he was crucified, died, and on the third day he rose again, so that we may live through him and have salvation through him. That is why we believe in him, period, point blank. And this is what Christians believe, and this is the foundation of our faith. In fact, the Apostle Paul states this in the Gospels, that if the resurrection did not happen, then our faith is futile. It's meaningless without the resurrection of Christ, because then we're just like everybody else. But because of Christ, we're saved. And the Quran rejecting this central key message in the gospel, and yet claiming to be a foundation that comes after the gospel of valid texts, just doesn't make any sense. And Wes nails this explanation.
And so if the Quran is true and it tells me as a Christian to judge by the gospel, then the Quran is false. And if the Quran is false, then the Quran is false. So the Quran has a dilemma. Because this is not just in one place. This is in multiple places throughout the Quran. Because I do not think the author of the Quran had any earthly idea what the Torah or the gospel were, and assumed that he knew. And it's not until later, when this book was translated into Arabic in its entirety, that Muslims started to go, uh-oh, we have a problem. And that's where arguments about corruption come into view.
Yeah, that's a good point. And many Muslim apologists will state this, that the Bible is corrupted because of all the versions that exist. But in reality, the versions do not change what the central message of the gospel is. And I could go further with the various versions of the Quran. They'll say there's only one version of the Quran, but there's actually different versions of hadiths. There's different, I hate to say audio, but spoken versions of hadiths as well, which I need to research a lot more into. But furthermore, this just shows that regardless of how many versions there are of the Bible, the central message of the Bible is point blank and very clear that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He rose again on the third day, and he will come to judge the living and the dead on Judgment Day, and that by putting our faith in him, we are saved. Period. And obviously there's way more. I'm simplifying it, but there's a lot more that comes with the message of Jesus and his teachings. So let's continue.
That's the dilemma. The Quran is essentially vouching for itself by saying that it stands in the same line as Moses and Jesus. But when Wes Huff actually checked that claim against the gospel, he argues that the Quran fails its own credential test. And later, Muhammad Hijab, one of Islam's most watched defenders, is going to respond to that directly. But before he does, Wes says that this problem goes one level deeper. The Quran doesn't just disagree with the gospel, it includes stories about Jesus that Wes says comes from later sources, written long after anyone who actually knew Jesus was around. And once you see which story ended up in the Quran, it becomes hard to unsee.
In my 4-year undergraduate degree, I probably read the Quran 5 or 6 times. If you think of the traditional...
Also, before he continues, one reason why I really value Wes Huff's take, his perspective on this topic, especially with Islam, is because he's very well read. He's studying it to be a PhD, a doctorate. He's a doctoral candidate for theology, I believe, in the university, one university in Toronto. And so he has a lot of knowledge, not just with college, not just taking courses, but reading through the Quran. He read through the Gitas of Hinduism, and he read through the Bible, and he has lots of thorough understanding of these different texts. And him being a Christian is just, he's able to articulate these perspectives so clearly and so beautifully to outsiders and people outside of the faith. And as you see right here,
Islamic narrative of Muhammad being a 7th century caravaner, I think it makes sense for some of the stories that you find of whether that's Abraham or Noah or Jesus, John the Baptist, Mary, who are in the Quran. He's traveling in and around the Arabian Peninsula up into areas like Syria and Jordan. He's being exposed to Christians and Jews. The traditional narrative is that he was illiterate. So he's not reading these stories. He's hearing them orally. But he would have been hearing these stories with no kind of discerning ability to differentiate between fables and campfire stories about these characters and what were the actual historically reliable, non-apocryphal documents. So the earliest source material for Jesus are the 27 books that we call the New Testament, primarily the biographies of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But there are other stories that are apocryphal in nature that talk about what Jesus was like as a child. And so infancy narratives become kind of this very popular, if we want to call them fan fiction. One of these is the Arab Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which has a story about Jesus making clay birds by a riverbank. And then some of the Jews get mad at him because it happens to be the Sabbath and he's working on the Sabbath. And so the story goes that he breathes on the birds, they turn into real birds, and the evidence flies away. This story ends up in the Quran. And we know that this is an apocryphal story. We know that it has no historical designation of actually being tied to the first century itinerant Jewish rabbi, Jesus of Nazareth. But it is something that would have been available, potentially in oral form, in the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century. And so you have these things that get smuggled into the text of the Quran, but they're jumbled. And they have characters that are in some places that shouldn't be in others. Haman, who's from the book of Esther, ends up in the Exodus story as the right-hand man to Pharaoh. Well, there are hundreds of years between the Persian story of Esther and the Egyptian story of Moses and Pharaoh. So there's confusion and conflation that's going on. And I was, at least when I was reading the Quran early on, aware of the biblical narratives. And so when I'm reading the Quran and I'm reading some of the Quran's versions of these stories, it's not hard to pick up on where they're just not right.
So at this point, Wes Huff has built a 3-part case. He's saying that the Quran denies the crucifixion. It tells Christians to judge it by the gospel, and then includes stories about Jesus that seem to come from later Christian legends that are false, not the historical. Now Muhammad Hijab finally responds, and his answer is simple. Wes Huff, skip the next verse.
I mean, all it takes is for him to have read the next verse. It says, and we have sent down the book, i.e. the Quran, in truth, to affirm that which has come before it. It's a distinguisher from what is true and what is false. Meaning what? The corrupted version of the Torah, the corrupted version of the Injil. The Quran mentions in chapter number 3, verse number 187, the books of the Christians and the books of the Jews. فَنَبَذُوهُ وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ. It means they have lost it. They have lost the books. They have not been able to preserve the books. Clearly, the Quran is telling this person and the Christian world that which Christian scholarship today has already confirmed: the corruption of the Bible. I don't think there's anybody now to be taken seriously that says that the Bible has not got contradictory versions, the New International, the Revised Standard Version, some things added into the books that were not there. Now, on the other point that he made,
this is absolutely fabulous, and I'm not saying that as a positive way, but it's absolutely ridiculous the point he's making here, and this is exactly what many Muslims use. They state that there's so many different versions of the Bible and the Gospels, such as the NIV, ESV, KJV, the Legacy Standard Bible. There was a lot of subversions. I get that, there are, but these could be contextual differences. But I forget this term. They are not contradicting the manuscripts that the Gospels are based in. They may be different contextually, whereas different phrases are used, but it is not different. It's not changing the central meaning of what the gospel is.
Verse starts, if you are in any doubt from that which has been revealed to you, then go and ask the people of the book that came before you. But I'm sure this man is clever enough to understand that this is a condition. If you are in doubt. So it's irrelevant.
He's saying, don't judge the Quran by the gospel Christians have now. The gospel's been corrupted. You can't trust it. Judge the gospel by the Quran. But that raises one question he still has to prove and not just assume. Had the gospel already changed by Muhammad's time? Because if Christians in the 600s had the same gospels Christians have today, then Hijab's answer doesn't rescue the Quran. It puts the pressure right back on it. So now West is going to test that claim against the historical scholarly evidence. Let's see it.
My Muslim friends often have large articulations. What you have in the gospel isn't what they had in the gospel. I think that's highly problematic. I don't see any reason why in the 7th century a gospel would be any different to what it is now, especially when in my own study in manuscript studies, I can find copies of the gospel in Syriac from Syria in the 6th and 7th centuries. It reads exactly like what my gospel reads today. So it's not that there's no evidence for that. Or if that is the case, and the Quran says that nobody can change God's words, and the gospel is God's word, who changed it? Who was able to thwart the God of Islam's ability to preserve his word? He was either unable to do it or he didn't do that. And when he says no one can change my words in the Quran, it's not true. And so ultimately, I think Muslims have a problem. They're painted into these corners. They have these passages about the Torah and the gospel, and yet the Quran doesn't seem to understand what those are or just flat out contradict it. The Quran denies the crucifixion when we know that the crucifixion happened. No matter which way you swing it, it's still a denial of one of the most established facts of all of history. Even like the most skeptical of biblical scholars, if they can say we can basically know nothing about the details of Jesus' life, we can say that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate, because we have so many intersecting sources, Christian and non-Christian alike. And I don't think that they can stand up to scrutiny.
That's a pretty powerful response by Wes Huff. If the gospel was already corrupted before Muhammad.
Yeah, I think I'll stop there. But these are all really good points that he makes. And the first point is the Islamic dilemma, how the Quran contradicts, general history, history that historians have supported for centuries. There's data that supports the resurrection, or excuse me, not the resurrection of Christ. That could be debatable with manuscripts that are outside the Gospels. Obviously, you need to do a lot more research into that. I'm sure there's something out there, but regarding the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, that's absolutely proven outside of the Gospels throughout history, even with atheist historians agreeing to that. And that's number one. And number two, the case that stating that the Gospels are corrupted, and yet stories in the Quran show stories of Jesus that are apocryphal. So outside of the 66 Gospels books, as Wes Huff stated, shows that these texts that are, these stories, these fables that are in the Quran are not actually factual, that are based from the Bible itself. Now, it could be based off of a apocryphal text, as he stated, but it's not based off of the 66 agreed upon books of the Bible, period, point blank. So I think these are really valid points as to why Islam, and this is just a basic point. This is not even going super deep into it, but I'd say these are very convincing arguments as to why Islam cannot really stand a chance against the Christianity in debating persuasiveness. And this is why many Christians get assaulted in places like Britain, or even places with debates. Even in the United States, there was a debater who's known as the Apostate Prophet, who became a Christian about a year ago. And he was going to do a debate with debate. I forgot the name of the YouTube channel, but they do debates, long form debates all across the platform on YouTube. They're very well known. Talk about religion, politics, etc., etc. And he got threats to his life, and he couldn't attend his own debate against a Muslim because he was an apostate. He was a lifelong Muslim, and he left Islam, was an atheist for 10 years, then came back to the faith of Christianity, or well, not came back, but he became a Christian. And it's a really beautiful story that he has. Despite my disagreements with him on Zionism, it's a very beautiful story for him coming to faith. And it's really a shame that people are just threatened like this. It's terrible. But I'll digress and I'll stop there. Please, again, comment your thoughts below. Let me know if you have more ideas, more topics of my videos I should react to, or reasons for why Islam is false. Please put them in the comments below. And thank you all so much for listening.